Well, bells tolled from church towers across Rome following the overnight announcement of the Pope's passing. He passed just one day after Easter. Thank you so much for joining us today at noon. I'm Keenan Smith. The Vatican says Pope Francis passed away early this morning following a series of health challenges in recent years. Most recently, a 38-day hospitalization for pneumonia in both lungs. It appeared, though, that the Pope had turned a corner. Just yesterday, Pope Francis appeared before the public for Easter Sunday. He blessed thousands in St. Peter's Square and treated them to a surprise Pope-mobile trip through the piazza, drawing wild cheers and applause. And just before that, the Pope met briefly with Vice President J.D. Vance. Scripps News Group reporter Amber Strong has a look back at the life of Pope Francis.
Before earning the moniker the People's Pope, Pope Francis was born in 1936 as Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Argentine-born son of Italian immigrants. As a youth, he worked as a bar bouncer at a nightclub and considered a career in chemistry before entering Jesuit school in 1958. There, he rose through the ranks, becoming a priest, Archbishop of Buenos Aires, and finally a cardinal in 2001. He took his place in the papacy in 2013 as the first Latin American and first Jesuit pope. His namesake was after St. Francis of Assisi, the patron saint of the poor, a name he worked to live up to, paying his own hotel bills and urging people not to travel to Rome to celebrate his rise to pope, but to give that money instead to the poor. Much of his teachings were focused on the impoverished, denouncing certain tenets of capitalism in early writings, remarking, "How can it be that it is not a news item when an elderly homeless person dies of exposure, but it is news when the stock market loses 2 points?" He also worked to bring attention to the environment in his writings, calling the planet our common home and seeking to reconcile the call of the faithful to stewardship of the earth. But he struggled to deal with a church marred by financial scandal and global allegations of sex abuse and cover-ups. In 2018, he took a small step in reconciliation, apologizing to abuse survivors after defending a Chilean bishop accused of turning a blind eye to abuse. The next year, Pope Francis formally defrocked Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was accused of abusing men and children for decades. And he helped establish a handbook that encouraged clergy members to report sexual abuse allegations to legal authorities. He also addressed other areas of contention, including the role of women in the church, placing women in more senior roles at the Vatican, and apologizing to Indigenous people in Canada who'd been abused by Catholic-run schools. Perhaps his most celebrated and scrutinized actions surrounded his views on LGBTQ people and same-sex marriage. He made headlines in 2016 after saying the church should apologize to the person who is gay whom it has offended, and encouraging parents to welcome their LGBTQ children. In 2023, the Vatican stated that transgender people could be baptized under certain circumstances, a shift in previous positions. His inclusive stances and focus on issues of social justice often put him at odds with more conservative members of the church. In 2023, Bishop Joseph Strickland, a conservative and frequent critic of the Pope, was relieved of duty following an investigation. Francis didn't shy away from international political conflicts, placing himself at the center of Russia's war with Ukraine, allowing a Ukrainian and Russian woman to participate together in Easter services, and repeatedly calling for an end to the violence. He also met with Israeli and Palestinian families impacted by the war, praying for both sides and calling the conflict terrorism, a comment that stirred controversy in Israel. Later in his papacy, he was frequently hospitalized and suffered from nerve pain, mobility issues, and respiratory illnesses. Francis hinted at stepping down in 2022, saying the door was open to a resignation, and, quote, "It's not strange, it's not a catastrophe. You can change the Pope." Amber Strong, Scripps News.
I'm Faraz Javed for 7 News Detroit. Monday morning, people across Metro Detroit woke up to heartbreaking news. Pope Francis passing away at the age of 88. The Pope was recovering from a near-fatal double pneumonia for which he was admitted to the hospital for nearly 40 days. And just yesterday, he blessed thousands in Vatican City for Easter Sunday. So the news of his death has left many lost for words.
I still start crying every once in a while. He was a unique man. First of all, he was from South America. That's the first Pope from South America. And he took Francis because he cared about the poor.
His kindness and his remembrance for those who really are the poorest of the poor, the ones who are in the fringes, the ones really who are struggling. His love and compassion for those folks are certainly something that sticks out.
Over at the cathedral at the Most Blessed Sacrament in Detroit, a black cloth hangs over the entrance to symbolize the mourning period. Father Mario Amore says Pope Francis's legacy is everlasting.
It's Easter Monday, so we're still rejoicing in the joy of the resurrection, and we do that today in a special way for Pope Francis.
He became the Pope in 2013.
Right.
What is the one thing that you'll always remember about him?
He picked our current Archbishop, Bishop Edward, our current one. He picked him as the head of our diocese, so there's going to be a lot of things about him that are going to be unique.
When he was ordained, he didn't wear the ermine cape or the bright red shoes or whatever. He was a humble man.
How do you plan to honor his life?
In prayer. We certainly look forward to the Church's process next to go ahead and select the next Pope.
In the coming days, the Vatican will release more information on when the selection process for the next pontiff will begin. But as per Father Amore, when that time comes, the cardinals of voting age will have 15 days to get to Rome.
And from there, they'll enter into the conclave. And it'll take as long as it takes for the cardinals to come to that consensus of who the next Holy Father will be.
Now, later tonight at 7, the Cathedral of the Most Blessed Sacrament in Detroit will be holding a Mass of suffrage for Pope Francis. We'll have more on that both on air and on WXYZ.com. In Detroit, I'm Faraz Javed, 7 News Detroit.
Well, we have more reaction now from Father David Pelican from Divine Child in Dearborn. He's been studying in Rome for the past 2 years, and he joins us now from Rome live via Zoom. Father Pelican, tell us a little bit about your first thoughts when you heard that Pope Francis has passed.
When I first heard Pope Francis had passed, I think I would certainly describe I was saddened. He had been the Pope for the entirety of my own priesthood, and it had a real strong voice calling us as priests to be men who went to the peripheries, who didn't just sit in an office, but went out on mission to bring the hope and the joy of Jesus to those who were maybe on the margins. So it was sadness, but I also thought it was very fitting that he passed the day after Easter, a day of great joy and hope in the resurrection.
Yeah, a day of rebirth. So how do you think the Pope will be remembered for his time at the head of the Catholic Church?
One of Pope Francis's points of emphasis that he returned to time and again was the call to have a heart of love, the heart of Jesus, for those who are on the peripheries of society. He called us to show the love of Jesus and to work for the betterment of people such as immigrants, the elderly, the unborn, the sick, the homeless, and orphans, those who maybe didn't have a voice in society. And I think that will be a big part of his legacy as our Pope.
And part of that legacy was sort of opening up the church, not just to people who might be referred to as the least of these, but also opening up to people who might be financially successful and prosperous, but still on the outside of the church, sort of liberalizing the church. Do you believe that possible change of course will last after Pope Francis, now that he's transitioned?
I believe and I hope that the church will continue, yes, to reach out to all peoples, regardless of their background, to bring, again, that message of hope and peace and joy.
Now, you are a priest, as we mentioned, although you have been in Rome for the last 2 years, so not certainly leading a flock. That said, how has Pope Francis, who, as you said, has been the leader of the Catholic Church during your entire time as a priest and beyond, how would you say he's impacted your teaching and your leadership of your flock?
I think he's had an impact on me personally, as well as on the Archdiocese. In 2016, the Archdiocese embarked on this synod, which was really a session of listening to all the people of the Archdiocese, as well as to the Holy Spirit. And one of the things that I think we discerned, listening to all those voices, including that of the Holy Father, was to be a church on mission. And so for me, it was a call to get out there, to not just be a priest who sits at my desk. Pope Francis often said to his priests, he said, you need to smell like the sheep, right? And that being the analogy of the shepherd who's not far away, but in among the sheep, not putting himself on a pedestal, but being a servant, a leader who sees his role primarily as one of service.
And of course, the church is now entering a period of mourning with the passing of the Pope. But what are your prayers for the future of church leadership? Obviously, there will be a process of selecting a new leader of the Catholic faith. What are your prayers for who that leader will be and what they will represent?
My hopes and my prayers are that we'll continue to listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit, to choose a leader for our times, a leader who can be a voice of clarity and of charity to the world, continuing to really bring the hope of the risen Jesus as we go forward.
Father David Pelican of Divine Child in Dearborn, who is currently studying in Rome, thank you so much for joining us and offering your perspective on the passing and the life of Pope Francis. Stay with 7 News Detroit and WXYZ.com all day long for continuing coverage of the death of Pope Francis.